Story 1. The Robbery. I've been working the night shift at this gas station on the outskirts of town for about a year now. It's far enough from the main road that we rarely see much traffic in the late hours. It's usually quiet. I sit behind the counter, ring up the occasional customer, and watch the clock crawl towards morning. This particular night was no different from any other. It was around 2:30 a.m. and I was counting down the minutes until the end of my shift. The store was empty, the lights outside casting long shadows across the parking lot, and the faint hum of the air conditioning was the only sound inside. I was counting the cash from the register, making sure everything was in order. My manager, Sandra, always reminded me to be extra careful, especially during the night shift. "You never know who might come through that door," she'd say. I always thought I had everything under control. I had just finished counting the last of the bills when the front door suddenly slammed open. The sound was so loud I nearly jumped out of my seat. Before I could even process what was happening, a man stormed inside. He looked rough, dirty clothes, wild eyes, and he smelled like he hadn't showered in days. He didn't say anything. His eyes were locked on the cash in my hands. For a moment, my body froze. Everything seemed to slow down. I knew I should have reacted, but I just stood there. Suddenly, he lunged at me, grabbing the money from my hands. It all happened so fast. 1 second, I had the cash. The next, he was already halfway to the door. That's when my instincts finally kicked in. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I bolted from behind the counter, adrenaline surging, and ran after him, shouting for him to stop. The guy wasn't moving fast. He stumbled as he reached the parking lot, his movements unsteady. I figured he must have been on something. Drugs, maybe. I could see the cash sticking out of his jacket pocket as he tried to make his escape. "Stop right there!" I yelled. He turned around, panic in his eyes. He tried to run faster, but his body wasn't cooperating. I closed the gap and grabbed his arm. He struggled, trying to shake me off, but I held on. We wrestled for a moment before he broke free and started running again, but he wasn't getting far. My heart was racing, but I wasn't about to give up. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking, and dialed 911. I explained the situation to the operator, who assured me that officers were on their way. I kept my distance, not wanting to corner him. Who knew what a desperate man might do? After what felt like hours, though it was only minutes, I heard the distant sound of police sirens. The man heard them too. He stopped dead in his tracks, his whole body tense. Moments later, the police cars pulled into the lot, lights flashing. 2 officers got out, guns drawn, ordering him to get on the ground. He hesitated, but knew it was over. Slowly, he dropped to his knees, hands behind his head. The officers cuffed him and led him away. One of the officers came over to me, asking for details. I explained everything, still trying to catch my breath. They found the cash still stuffed in his jacket. The officer told me that the man was homeless and likely on drugs, desperate enough to do something reckless. Watching him being led to the squad car, a part of me felt sorry for him. But I was also relieved that it was over. The officers thanked me for my quick response, but warned me that chasing him wasn't the safest option. I nodded, still shaken. When my shift finally ended, I locked up and headed home, the night's events replaying in my mind. I couldn't help but think how close I had come to something much worse. Story 2. The Ghost Car. The road stretched out before us, dark and winding, as we drove through the forest. It was supposed to be a weekend of fun, just me, Liam, and our friends Zoe and Ryan, heading out for a camping trip. The college semester had been brutal, and we all needed a break. The thought of sleeping under the stars, roasting marshmallows and telling ghost stories around the fire had us all excited. But something about that night felt off. The trees seemed to loom closer to the road, their branches reaching out like twisted fingers. The moonlight barely pierced through the thick canopy, casting strange shadows that danced across the pavement. I tried to shake off the unease that settled in my stomach, telling myself it was just pre-trip jitters. We were laughing, the radio playing our favorite songs, when suddenly a sharp turn came out of nowhere. Liam, who was driving, tried to swerve, but the car skidded on the wet road. The world spun around us as the tires screeched, and we crashed into the trees. I heard Zoe scream, and then everything went black. When I opened my eyes, we were all outside the car. It was crumpled against a tree, the front smashed in, steam rising from the engine. Everything felt distant, muffled. Zoe stood next to me, pale-faced, and Ryan was on the other side, staring at the wreckage. "Is everyone okay?" I asked, my voice sounding strangely flat. Zoe nodded, but didn't look at me. Ryan was silent, eyes fixed on the car. I turned to see what he was staring at, and my heart dropped. Inside the car, still strapped into our seats, were our bodies. I blinked, unable to process what I was seeing. There I was, slumped over in the passenger seat, a trickle of blood running down my forehead. Liam was still gripping the steering wheel, his face twisted in pain. Zoe and Ryan were in the back, their faces ashen. "We're outside the car," Zoe whispered, finally looking at me with wide, fearful eyes. "But we're still in there." I didn't know what to think. It felt like a nightmare, but everything was so vivid, so real. I reached out to touch the car, but my hand passed right through the metal. Panic started to build. "Are we dead?" Ryan asked, his voice trembling. I didn't want to answer. The thought was too horrifying. But what else could explain it? We were standing here, outside our bodies, unable to touch or feel anything. The forest around us seemed to grow darker, the trees closing in. The air felt thick, as though something was watching us from the shadows. "We have to get out of here," I said, trying to sound brave, but my voice cracked. Maybe there's a way to fix this." But where could we go? We were in the middle of the woods, far from any help. The only thing that seemed real was the car and our bodies trapped inside. Time passed in a blur. I don't know how long we stood there, staring at ourselves. Every sound in the forest, the rustle of leaves, the snap of a branch, made my heart race. It felt like the trees themselves were whispering, mocking us, telling us we didn't belong in this world anymore. At some point, I felt dizzy, like I was being pulled into a dark hole. My vision blurred, the sounds faded, and everything went black again. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. The bright lights stung my eyes, and the beeping of machines filled the room. I turned my head, feeling groggy, like waking from a long, terrible dream. Liam was in the bed next to me, and Zoe and Ryan were there too, bandaged and hooked up to monitors. "We're alive," I whispered, still in disbelief. A nurse came in, checking our vitals. "You all had a nasty accident, but you're going to be okay," she said. "You've been unconscious for a couple of days, but you're out of danger now." It was hard to process. My mind was still reeling from what we had experienced. I looked at Zoe, who was staring back with wide eyes. Ryan was pale but relieved. It had felt so real, our bodies, the fear, the feeling of being ghosts. But now, lying in this hospital bed, I wasn't sure what to believe. Had it all been a dream? A shared nightmare brought on by the crash? As I lay there, the memory of the dark forest and the sensation of being trapped outside my own body lingered, too vivid to ignore. But as I looked at my friends, safe and alive, I tried to push the thoughts away. We were okay. We had survived. The nightmare was behind us. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the night. If you enjoyed the hunt and want to see more adventures, don't forget to hit that like button. And if you want to stay updated on all our midnight mysteries, make sure to subscribe and ring that bell. Your support helps us uncover more secrets and bring you thrilling new content every week. Until next time, stay curious and keep hunting. This is The Midnight Hunt, signing off.